Welcome back, everyone. Hope you're doing amazing. This is history, the entire history of Spain. We actually already did the entire history of the Spanish Empire by the same channel, but this is different apparently. So that's what we're doing today. Obviously, we have Spain, Hispania, Iberia, whatever you want to call it. We're probably just going to focus on the part that is not Portugal, but I'm sure we'll have some Portugal history here as well. Glad you guys are here. I am Shields, and this is what we do. We do history. Let's jump right in.
Human habitation in Spain dates back hundreds of thousands of years. These prehistoric peoples eventually developed into Neolithic farming communities and the distinctive Bronze Age cultures of Iberia. By the dawn of the Iron Age in the first millennium BC, the peninsula was a mosaic of tribes and trading colonies. Indigenous groups included the Iberians along the Mediterranean coast, Celtic peoples in the interior and northwest, the Lusitanians in the west, and the Tartessians in the southwest. At the same time, seafaring civilizations from the eastern Mediterranean had established outposts along the western coastline, particularly Phoenician traders, who founded settlements like Gadir, modern-day Cadiz.
Interesting. So Phoenicians founded the first remnants of like a colonial state here.
As early as the 9th century BC. Greek colonists also arrived during.
This is what I did know, though. I didn't know about the Phoenicians, but I definitely knew that there was Greek city-states that lined the eastern coast of Spain.
The 7th to 6th centuries BC, establishing settlements of their own at sites such as Empúries in Catalonia. By the 5th to 4th centuries BC, Carthage, a Phoenician successor state in North Africa, extended its influence over southern Iberia, controlling former Phoenician colonies and new bases like Carthago Nova.
New Carthage, basically.
Cartagena. Iberia remained a patchwork of such powers, both native and foreign alike, until the 3rd century BC, when it became a battleground for the two ancient superpowers of the age, Carthage and Rome.
Right, when the Second Punic War really takes off, this is the battle for Spain. It's just true and becomes such a battleground for the entirety of the Second Punic War. Pretty much where I think that the tipping point happens is Spain, really.
During the Second Punic War, fought from 218 to 201 BC.
Oh, we're going to talk about Hannibal in the Alps, and this is where he started, obviously, that trek.
Hannibal Barca famously marched from Spain across the Alps against Rome. But ultimately the Romans defeated Carthage and expelled the Carthaginians.
They did not really defeat Hannibal so much, unless you count the Battle of Zama between Scipio Africanus and Hannibal. But overall, Carthage has, so many more fronts than just Hannibal. Hannibal is just such a impressive general that even him couldn't take down the Roman Empire, the Roman Republic by himself.
From Iberia by 206 BC. Over the next 2 centuries, Rome gradually conquered the rest of the Iberian Peninsula, facing stiff resistance from local tribes, notably the Celtiberian.
My bad.
Over the next 2 centuries, Rome gradually conquered the rest of the Iberian Peninsula, facing stiff resistance from local tribes, notably the Celtiberians. The Roman conquest was completed in 19 BC.
Yes, after the Roman Empire, after the Civil Wars, and Augustus kind of like squashed them up in that like top corridor up there in the north.
Under Emperor Augustus.
Yes.
After the Cantabrian Wars in the far north. Thereafter, the region was firmly integrated into the Roman world as Hispania. The Romans built many cities across the territory, such as modern-day Tarragona, Merida, and Zaragoza, as well as roads, aqueducts, and other infrastructure.
Basically Romicizing it.
Hispania's economy flourished, exporting commodities like grain, olive oil, wine, and metals to other parts of the empire. Over time, the local inhabitants adopted the Latin language and Roman customs, becoming increasingly Romanized. Hispania even produced some of Rome's most influential figures, including the philosophers Seneca and Lucan, the poet Martial, and the emperors Trajan and Hadrian.
Really? Didn't know that.
By the late Roman period, the territory of Hispania had been thoroughly Romanized, laying the groundwork for the emergence of early Spanish culture, including the Spanish language, which evolved from the Latin introduced by the Romans.
Yeah, we call that the Romance language tree.
As well as the spread of Christianity, which rapidly became dominant across the region. As the Western Roman Empire began to collapse in the early 5th century AD, several migrating Germanic tribes invaded and ultimately settled across Iberia. In the early 400s, waves of Vandals, Suebi, and Alans crossed the Pyrenees and seized different regions. The Suebi established a kingdom in Galicia, and the Vandals took control of parts of the south. Before long, however, another Germanic people, the Visigoths, entered Hispania around 415 AD and gradually unified the peninsula under their rule.
We don't really have much conversation about the Visigoths, so if you guys have any particular videos about them, put them down below.
Centered first in Toulouse, in modern France, and later in Toledo, the Visigothic kingdom expelled or subdued the other tribes, and also pushed out the
Isn't Toledo modern-day Madrid? I might be ignorant saying that, I don't know.
Byzantine Greek enclave in the south that had been established some time earlier. By the late 6th century, the Visigothic kingdom of Toledo governed nearly all of Iberia, lasting for over 2 centuries as a successor Roman state, preserving many of the laws, customs, culture, and religion of the Hispano-Roman population. Then, in 711 AD,
here comes the Arabs.
A momentous invasion changed the course of Spanish history forever. An army of Muslim Arabs and Berbers from North Africa, under Tariq ibn Ziyad, crossed the Strait of Gibraltar and landed in Iberia. They took advantage of an ongoing Visigothic civil war and won a decisive victory over King Roderick at the Battle of Guadalete. Following this, the Muslim forces, led by Tariq and his superior Musa ibn Nusayr, swept rapidly across the peninsula. By 718 AD, the invaders, known to Europeans as Moors, had conquered almost the entirety of Iberia. The region came to be known as Al-Andalus under Muslim rule, with only a small area in the mountainous north remaining outside their control.
Yeah, because it's just a formidable place, and that's also the last place that the Romans conquered. It's just like this little not enclave, but this little spot in this. It's almost like, I think of it almost like the Highlands of Scotland here.
Eventually forming the Christian kingdom of Asturias. The Islamic conquest inaugurated a vibrant new era. Muslim Spain became a province of the vast Umayyad Caliphate. But when that empire fragmented during the Abbasid Revolution in the 8th century, an independent Muslim polity was declared, first as the Emirate of Cordoba under Abd al-Rahman I in 756, and later as the Caliphate of Cordoba under Abd al-Rahman III in 929. Under Muslim rule, Spain witnessed a remarkable flourishing of science, philosophy, medicine, art, and architecture as part of the Golden Age, which spread across the wider Islamic world.
Yeah, like I was about to say, that's so cool that it does not just like become an echo chamber like Baghdad and other places. It literally transfers across the Muslim world.
There was also a significantly higher degree of religious tolerance than in many contemporary European kingdoms. While Islam was dominant, Muslim authorities allowed Christians and Jews to practice their faiths in exchange for a tax,
Jizya,
leading to a multi-religious society. This period, sometimes called La Convivencia, saw Muslims, Christians, and Jews living in relative peace and producing a rich cultural blend. Great
something we don't talk about that much.
Intellectual figures, such as the Muslim polymath Averroes and the Jewish philosopher Maimonides, lived in Al-Andalus. The city of Cordoba itself boasted libraries and universities that were among the most advanced in Europe at the time.
Wow.
Al-Andalus also became immensely prosperous, witnessing the introduction of new crops, such as rice, and irrigation.
Ooh, is that by way of like China? Or because obviously that's where rice stems from.
Techniques from the Muslim world, as well as becoming renowned for its production of silk and steel.
So this makes sense because this has been done via the Silk Road, right?
Many of Spain's architectural marvels were constructed during this era of Muslim rule, including the iconic Great Mosque of Cordoba and, later, the Alhambra Palace in Granada. Politically, however, Muslim Spain began to fragment over time. The unified Caliphate of Cordoba disintegrated in the early 11th century into smaller principalities called taifas, which frequently competed with one another. This fragmentation made it easier for the Christian kingdoms of the north, which had emerged out of the earlier kingdom of Asturias, to begin reclaiming territory.
And you can start to see a lot of familiar names like Leon, Castile, Navarre, Aragon. And these, of course, these kingdoms and counties are going to become more mainstream very quickly.
Over the ensuing centuries, the frontier between Islamic and Christian Spain shifted back and forth as power waxed and waned on each side. Figures such as El Cid exploited the feuding power dynamics to carve out territories for themselves, but by the turn of the 13th century, the northern Christian kingdoms of Leon, Castile,
and then Portugal's already a thing right there.
Navarre, Aragon, and Portugal had consolidated and began to push their frontiers further south as part of the centuries-long conflict against the Muslims known as the Reconquista. Alarmed by the Christian advances, the Muslim Taifa kings sought help from powerful Berber dynasties in North Africa. The Almoravids, and later the Almohads, were Islamic fundamentalist empires that crossed from Morocco into Spain to reinforce Muslim defenses. The decisive,
almost like a crusade,
turning point came in the year 1212 at the Battle of Las Navas de Tolosa, where a coalition of Christian kings won a crushing victory over the Almohads and rapidly overran most of Al-Andalus in the aftermath. By 1250, nearly the entire peninsula was under Christian control, with the sole exception of the Emirate of Granada in the far south. This last remaining Muslim enclave survived for 2 more centuries by paying tribute to Castile and skillfully navigating the political landscape. Meanwhile, the various Christian kingdoms continued to consolidate.
So you got Ferdinand and Isabella right there. So we're in the 15th century?
Forming the early foundations of a unified Spain. By the late 15th century, however, the crowns of Castile and Aragon had been joined through the marriage of Queen Isabella I and King Ferdinand II in 1469. These Catholic monarchs operated in unison to consolidate their power and direct their combined forces against the last Muslim stronghold of Granada, which fell in 1492, ending the 781 years of Islamic rule in Iberia.
So many things happened in 1492, huh?
In that same fateful year, the king and queen made 2 further momentous decisions. First, they expelled Spain's remaining Jewish population, who refused to convert to Christianity, extending the remit of the Spanish Inquisition, whose task it was to enforce the religious uniformity.
And that's kind of interesting that, it was like forced conversion. You expel the Muslims, you expel the Jews, and then you have that same temperature, tone, stance, whatever you want to call it, to the New World, whether it be the Mayans or the Aztecs, where you have a Spanish majority try to exert rule over there, and the whole purpose was to Christianize, right, and create new lands. Obviously, there was more economic reasons for all of this in the beginning, but it's so interesting that this was the New World forced conversion was no anomaly. It started even here with forcing the Muslims and the Jews out. So interesting, though.
Of the Catholic faith. The Inquisition targeted converted Jews, conversos, and later converted Muslims, moriscos, suspected of secretly practicing
That's so crazy. Y'all are some crazy people.
Their old religions. Secondly, they agreed to sponsor Christopher Columbus's voyage westward across the Atlantic Ocean, which ushered in a new era that would place Spain on the path to global prominence.
Yes, the Genoese, man. Just to get that out there. Of course, he's Genoese by way of Italia. And then, of course, Portugal refused the idea because they thought it was absurd. And now, here we are, Spain.
In October of that year, Columbus landed in the Bahamas, opening the door to the European discovery of the Americas. Over the following decades, Spanish conquistadors explored and conquered vast territories in the New World, including the powerful native empires of the Aztecs and Incas. These territorial gains gave rise to the Spanish Empire, one of the largest ever in history, which at its height in the 18th century encompassed nearly all of South and Central America, Mexico, Florida, parts of what is now the United States, colonies in the Asia-Pacific, such as the Philippines, and outposts in Africa. The immense wealth that flowed into Spain's treasury, especially silver and gold from mines in Mexico and Peru, made it one of the most powerful and wealthy nations on Earth. Yet Spain's imperial expansion was not
Which then strengthened their own armies and allowed for a continuation of Spain's influence in Europe.
confined to the New World. In 1516, the throne passed to Charles I.
It's Charles I, but it says Charles V because we're talking HRE. I don't know why I did that, but yeah, now you're gonna have a much larger Habsburg empire that's attached from Spain.
The grandson of Ferdinand and Isabella.
Yeah.
Charles became better known as Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor, having inherited not only Spain, but also the Habsburg realms across Central Europe.
Look at that. So you got Naples, you could call it the two Sicilies, you got Sardinia, you got pretty much Milan, the entire Germanic area, of course. Just insane, the amount of territory. Just, it's insane.
As a result, Charles V ruled an empire upon which it was said that the sun never set. He was simultaneously King of Spain,
Yeah, specifically because of the Philippines right there.
which included Castile, Aragon, Naples, and its New World colonies, and Holy Roman Emperor, making him the most powerful monarch of the era.
Powerful monarch in the world, for sure. For sure.
However, this immense territorial inheritance brought considerable challenges. The administration of Spanish royal authority was centralized under Charles V's son, Philip II, who established a new capital at Madrid in 1561. Even so, many of the Habsburg territories faced internal and external pressures. Much of northern Europe was in the midst of the Protestant Reformation in the mid-16th century, and Spain, as the leading Catholic power in Europe, committed significant resources to defending the faith.
Yeah, we saw what extent they would go to defend the faith in Spain and abroad. This is just like playtime for them.
This included efforts to suppress the Dutch revolt in the Low Countries, which ultimately
failed.
led to the independence of the Dutch Republic and conflict with England, most notably the ill-fated expedition of the Spanish Armada in 1588. Meanwhile, the Mediterranean became a key front in the struggle between Christianity and Islam, as the expanding Ottoman Empire posed a significant threat. In 1571, Philip II joined forces with Venice and the papacy to decisively defeat the Ottoman fleet at the Battle of Lepanto. In 1580, Philip also inherited the Portuguese crown,
And then now we have an Iberian Union.
resulting in the Iberian Union between Spain and Portugal. This union lasted for 60 years and brought together their vast overseas empires under a single monarch.
And think about that. Like, if you think about like the two most notable colonial empires is Portugal and Spain. Now later you'll get more British, Dutch, French involvement, but these are the two real beginnings right here.
The late 16th and early 17th centuries marked the height of Spain's golden age, not only in terms of imperial might, but also in cultural achievement. It was a period of flourishing art and literature, fueled by royal patronage and the wealth of empire. Celebrated painters such as El Greco, Diego Velázquez, and Murillo.
That's a really cool painting right there. It's because of the perspectives that it has.
Created some of their most iconic works,
Wow.
while writers like Miguel de Cervantes penned enduring masterpieces such as Don Quixote. Architectural wonders like the royal palace of El Escorial were also completed during this time. Yet, even as this cultural renaissance was unfolding, Spain's political and economic fortunes were beginning to decline. The 1600s saw Spain become embroiled in the 30 Years' War,
As did most of Europe, and it was horrible. Horrible.
as well as other pan-European conflicts that further drained its strength. Multiple crises occurred throughout the century. Portugal successfully restored its independence, ending the Iberian Union in 1640. Revolts in Catalonia and territorial losses to France, formalized in the Treaty of the Pyrenees in 1659, further eroded Spain's standing in European affairs. By the time the ineffectual Charles II, who was physically and mentally frail from generations of Habsburg inbreeding, died in 1700 without an heir, Spain was a dramatically weakened power. The death of the last Spanish Habsburg king sparked a major European conflict, the War of the Spanish Succession.
It's always It's so crazy to see how these power vacuums create inherent wars.
Competing claims to the Spanish throne pitted the French Bourbon dynasty against the Austrian Habsburgs, along with their respective allies. A lengthy war followed, with battles fought across Europe and in Spain itself, as local factions supported different claimants. The war ended in 1714, with the Treaty of Utrecht, and Philip V, the French candidate, was recognized as King of Spain.
And that's how the Bourbons were put on the throne, right?
Although he was forced to cede some territories, with Britain taking possession of Gibraltar
Yeah.
and Minorca for a time as part of the peace process. Under the new Bourbon rulers, Spain embarked on a program of reform and centralization. Philip V and his successors introduced French-style absolutist policies aimed
Recalls who's on the throne in France? Bourbon.
at modernizing the administration and economy, inspired in part by Enlightenment ideas. In the mid-18th century, King Charles III implemented numerous Enlightenment-inspired reforms, promoting science and academia, investing in infrastructure like roads and canals, modernizing agriculture and commerce, and reducing the power of the church. These initiatives, known as the Bourbon reforms, sought to revitalize a stagnating economy and streamline governance in both Spain and its colonies. By the end of the century, Spain had regained some prestige and made progress in modernization, though it remained far from the dominance it had enjoyed in the 16th century. Moreover, trouble was once again looming on the horizon. The French Revolution and the emergence of Napoleon Bonaparte upended Europe in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, and Spain was no exception. Initially an ally of Napoleonic France, Spain's fortunes shifted in 1808, when Napoleon seized the Spanish throne
Yeah, and now you're gonna have his brother, of course, on the throne.
and installed his brother,
Yeah.
Joseph Bonaparte, as king. This provoked a mass uprising on the 2nd of May 1808, when the people of Madrid rebelled against French occupation, an event famously depicted by the painter Francisco Goya. The rebellion quickly spread, launching the Peninsular War.
A brutal guerrilla war campaign, and then of course you have aid by the British, you have aid by the Spanish, the Portuguese, but it's brutal.
Spanish regulars, local militias, and guerrilla fighters took up arms against the French occupiers. The British, led by Arthur Wellesley, the Duke of Wellington, allied with the Spanish resistance and Portuguese forces to fight the French. The war was brutal, with atrocities committed on both sides. After years of bloody conflict, the French were gradually worn down, and by 1814, Napoleon's troops were driven out of Spain. While Spain fought for its own liberty, her colonies in the Americas seized the moment to pursue their own freedom. Beginning in the 1810s, inspired by the American and French revolutions, Spanish America rose in revolt. By 1825, nearly all of Spain's colonies, including Mexico, Gran Colombia, Peru, Argentina, and others, had won independence after years of bloody struggle. Spain was left with only a few overseas territories, her island colonies in the Caribbean and the Philippines. The loss of its empire dealt a devastating blow to Spain's economy and global prestige, yet more instability followed throughout the 19th century. King Ferdinand VII, whose reign veered between absolutism and liberalism, died in 1833, leaving the crown to his daughter, Isabella II. However, his brother, Don Carlos, contested the succession, sparking the First Carlist War, a brutal
Never heard of that one.
civil conflict between liberals supporting Isabella and traditionalists backing Carlos. Although Isabella's cause prevailed, Carlist uprisings would re-emerge repeatedly during the century. Despite securing her position, Isabella II's reign was plagued by political instability, military coups, and factionalism. There were signs of modernization, with the emergence of railways, industrial growth, and fledgling liberal reforms across the country. Nevertheless, her popularity plummeted, and she was eventually deposed in 1868. This ushered in a brief period of political experimentation. In 1870, the Italian Amedeo I became king, but
Really? An outsider?
he abdicated after only 3 tumultuous years. The resulting First Spanish Republic, proclaimed in his wake, quickly collapsed also amid internal divisions and renewed Carlist violence. The Bourbon dynasty was restored in 1875, with Isabella's son, King Alfonso XII, taking the throne. A new constitution was introduced, along with a political system based on alternating conservative and liberal governments in an attempt to stabilize the country.
So checks and balances, okay.
This period brought a degree of political calm to a beleaguered Spain. Yet further humiliation followed in the final years of the century.
Of course, you got the Spanish-American War, and you're going to lose quite a bit of territory because of this.
With the outbreak of the Spanish-American War in 1898. What began as US support for Cuban independence quickly escalated into a disastrous war that stripped Spain of all its remaining major overseas colonies: Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines. The disaster of '98 plunged Spain into a period of soul-searching, and with its empire practically gone, the country turned its attention to Africa, establishing a
As did most European nations.
colonial foothold in Morocco in the early 20th century. Although King Alfonso XIII kept Spain neutral during World War I, which briefly boosted the economy, post-war crises soon followed. In 1921, Spanish troops suffered a humiliating defeat at the hands of Berber tribesmen in Morocco. The event became a national scandal and fueled widespread discontent among the military. By 1923, General Miguel Primo de Rivera staged a coup d'etat, establishing a dictatorship
I don't know too much about all this, so this is new to me.
with the king's support. The constitution was suspended, and Primo de Rivera ruled autocratically as prime minister. Though the regime was born of illegitimacy, it enjoyed early success, ending the Moroccan conflict, stabilizing the economy, and investing in infrastructure. However, by 1930, amid economic downturn and eroding support, the regime unraveled. The monarchy, tainted by its association with the dictatorship, soon collapsed. In April 1931, elections showed overwhelming support for Republican candidates, prompting King Alfonso XIII to go into exile. The Second Spanish Republic was swiftly proclaimed. The Republic introduced sweeping reforms: a secular constitution, women's suffrage, land redistribution, regional autonomy, and curbs on church and military power.
So basically, a level playing field finally.
Although, these changes alienated many conservative elements within the country, leading to further political polarization and violence. Throughout the early 1930s, a series of narrowly won elections swung Spain's political fortunes left and right, until in July 1936, military officers led by Francisco Franco launched a coup d'etat.
And then here comes the autocracy.
However, they failed to win support across the entire country, thus triggering the outbreak of the Spanish Civil War. The nationalists, led by Franco, and comprising monarchists, fascists, and clergy, faced the Republicans, who were made up of liberals, socialists, communists, and anarchists. The war quickly became internationalized against the broader geopolitical backdrop of the time. Nazi Germany and fascist Italy backed Franco, while the Soviet Union, along with many international volunteers, supported the Republic. The war was brutal, with both sides committing atrocities, such as the bombing of Guernica. Eventually, the nationalists, through better organization and greater support, triumphed when they captured Madrid in 1939, and Franco promptly declared victory. An estimated 350,000 Spaniards died in the conflict, and hundreds of
So unnecessary too.
thousands fled abroad, leaving behind a country that was shattered, traumatized, and now under a new dictatorship. Franco established an authoritarian, ultra-conservative state. The monarchy was suspended, the Falange became the only legal party, and thousands of Republicans were executed or imprisoned. The regime promoted Catholicism, censored dissent, and suppressed regional languages and identities such as Basque, Catalan, and Galician.
See, we talk about Mussolini, we talk about Stalin even, and we talk obviously about Hitler. We don't talk enough about Franco and how brutal and just disdainful this regime has on the world, or had on the world.
In favor of a unified Spanish identity rooted in Castilian culture. During the Second World War, although sympathetic to the Axis powers, Franco kept Spain officially neutral, sparing the country from the destruction that engulfed much of the continent. After the war, Spain was somewhat politically isolated, but the onset of the Cold War changed this. Western powers, valuing Franco's staunch anti-communism, re-engaged with his regime, and opened military bases in exchange for financial
But that's like saying like Hitler didn't like communism, so let's like him.
aid. In the 1950s and 60s, Franco's government implemented liberal economic reforms, giving rise to the so-called Spanish Miracle, during which rapid industrialization, tourism, and foreign investment transformed Spain into a modern economy. Living standards rose, though inequality and repression persisted, particularly among students and regional nationalists. As the 1970s began, many Spaniards began to wonder what would happen once the aging and childless Franco passed away.
Another succession crisis.
He named Prince Juan Carlos, grandson of Alfonso XIII, as his successor, hoping to preserve Francoism for years to come. However, when Franco died in 1975 and Juan Carlos ascended the throne, he surprised many by leading Spain's peaceful transition to democracy. He appointed
And Franco probably would not have liked that.
reformist Adolfo Suarez as prime minister, legalized political parties, and held free elections in 1977. A new democratic constitution followed in 1978, establishing a parliamentary monarchy and recognizing Spain's regional diversity through a system of autonomous communities. The remaining decades of the 20th century saw democratic Spain integrate into the Western world, joining NATO in 1982 and the European Economic Community in 1986. The nation experienced prosperity and global prominence never seen before, symbolized by hosting the 1992 Olympics in Barcelona. This prosperity continued into the new millennium, but the global financial crisis of 2008 brought much of this progress to a halt, leading
As did most.
to massive unemployment and the implementation of austerity measures to stabilize the country's faltering finances. In the years since, Spain has put itself on the path to recovery, showing signs of a revitalized economy. Although it continues to face internal challenges, such as the Catalan independence movement and questions about the future role of the monarchy, Spain today stands as the stable, democratic nation it has long aspired to be, having resiliently endured centuries of turmoil, division, and constant transformation that have come to define its past.
Wow. We're going to have to definitely dissect more Spanish history in the future. That was a lot over a short period of time, but throughout the antiquity to the Muslim rule to the Reconquista, with the continuation of many different transformations of government. What a turbulent but triumphant country it has become. Guys, I don't have much more to say besides let me flood some comments with some videos for more about Spain, whether it be specifically some of the wars or some of the politics or anything in between that's historic for Spain or the Spanish Empire. Appreciate you as always. You have a great rest of your day.